If you're a homeowner looking to install a solar PV array, perhaps with a battery and maybe with some other green energy devices, this video is for you. It's made by me, a homeowner who's just been through this experience, and in it I'm going to attempt to document all the things that I wish I had known before it started, with the aim of giving you some ideas and also helping you avoid some of the gotchas that we experienced. The basic idea is to generate electricity via a PV array, to use it immediately or to store it in a battery for use in the hours of darkness, and meanwhile to feed any surplus back to the grid. To generate as much of our own electricity as possible, we'd need to install as many solar PV panels as we could. So that's where we started. We were able to fit 15 panels on our south-facing roof, and these generate anything from a trickle up to about 5 kilowatts per hour. Incoming energy is routed to an inverter, which converts DC to AC before passing it for use by our domestic appliances. And there's a battery coupled to the inverter. Any solar-generated electricity that's not used by the house will be used to charge the battery. And when the battery is 100% charged, surplus will be fed back to the grid. To get paid for feeding back to the grid, we'd need a so-called feed-in tariff from our supplier, Octopus Energy. And here's the first gotcha I'm going to tell you about: paperwork. Initially, we couldn't get a feed-in tariff because we were missing two very important bits of paper. The first of these was a G99 connection confirmation from the national grid. That we didn't have this was embarrassing, because our contractor should have applied to our distribution network operator, or DNO, and got approval before installing our inverter and connecting it to the grid. The national grid needs to be kept in balance. If everybody started suddenly sending 5 kilowatts per hour back to the grid, that would cause huge problems. And it's why every installation needs to be approved by the DNO before it actually goes ahead. To solve the problem, I had to complete the DNO connection application myself. It was very technical, and I was only able to do it with the help of a national grid engineer who truly went above and beyond. The second document we needed was an MCS certificate for the installation. We hadn't known we'd need one, and the main contractor was clearly sloppy because he should have provided one. We eventually got this certificate by browbeating them and threatening to report them to MCS. So the lesson here is to make sure you've got your G99 connection certificate and your MCS certificate before you pay your contractors. So everything's installed. Hooray! But how do you know it's working? With plumbing, it's easy because you turn on a tap, water comes out, you turn it off, the water stops. But how do you know your inverter's working or your battery? Well, here's the next gotcha, because they have to be connected to the internet. In schematic form, here's the PV array connected to the inverter, which has a two-way connection to the battery and a one-way connection to the rest of the house and the grid. On the bottom of the inverter is a Wi-Fi dongle, and there's broadband coming into the house, complete with Wi-Fi. The person installing the inverter has to connect the dongle to your home Wi-Fi, but if the signal isn't strong enough, then the dongle simply won't find it. In our house, the distance between them was too great, and there were some thick walls too. The installer simply couldn't connect the dongle, and it wasn't their job to solve the Wi-Fi problem. It's a long story and a different story, but I ended up having to figure out and install a mesh Wi-Fi system myself. The net of this is a very long Ethernet cable going through the house, connecting one Wi-Fi node near the broadband router to another node that's only a couple of meters away from the inverter. Hey presto! Strong Wi-Fi signal, and the inverter can now connect to the internet. And also to Solax. Yes, Solax have all the data from our inverter. They can see what it's doing 24/7, they can control it, install firmware updates, and they can make all this data available to us via an app. So you'll need to install an app onto your smartphone. And then, from anywhere you happen to be, you'll be able to see what your electricity generation and consumption look like. So the second lesson here is that before you install your inverter, make sure it's going to be in reach of your Wi-Fi. Once it's set up and working, This app is all about monitoring. It doesn't give you control over anything, but the monitoring is very, very reassuring. Let's have a look at some of what it can show you. In this first clip, we can see 861 watts being generated by the PV array. Domestic appliances are using 503 watts of this, so the balance, the surplus, 358 watts, is going to the battery, which is 14% charged. The sun has come out for the second clip, and we're now generating nearly 5 kilowatts an hour. The battery is charging as fast as it can, 3.35 kilowatts an hour, so there's now some surplus being fed to the grid as well. In this third clip, the battery is fully charged, so even more surplus is going to the grid. And later in the day, after the sun's gone down, we're now drawing on our reserves in the battery, which is delivering 3.34 kilowatts per hour to the house. Finally, we get to a point where the battery is depleted. There's always something of a residual charge showing. And we now draw any power we need from the grid. It's just 967 watts in this case. I described the app as providing reassurance. We can see what's going on. But because of the Wi-Fi issue, we had no visibility to what was going on for the first few weeks after installation. And when we did get the app running, we discovered we had issues with the battery. First of all, the battery wasn't charging. Incorrect wiring, which the installer came back and fixed. And then we could see it wasn't discharging. More incorrect wiring, which the installer again came back and fixed. We wouldn't have known we'd had these problems without the app being up and running. In the process of getting the wiring fixed, we learned some things about the battery. Firstly, we can't charge our battery from the grid. Now, you might say it was naive of us to expect to be able to do so, but the point is that nobody explained to us beforehand how all this stuff worked and what the limitations might be. So not being able to charge it from the grid in off-peak times was a bit of a disappointment. Secondly, we were sold a 5 kilowatt battery. Now, we had been promised something bigger, I think it was 7 or something, but it turned out that only 5 kilowatt batteries were available at the time. So we went with that. It was kind of 5k or the highway, so we took what we could. But this prompts another question. How big a battery should we have had? How big is big enough? And the answer is, we simply don't know. And this is the next gotcha. How big a battery should you have? In fact, there's also a question as to whether you should have a battery at all. Getting answers to these questions is mind-bogglingly complicated. In fact, I've just watched a 20-minute video on how to calculate the ROI on your battery, and at the end the conclusion was there are too many variables, it can't be done. Let's have a look at some of those variables. How much solar energy will you generate per annum? How much of that will you consume? And how much will be surplus? Do you have an energy diverter that will draw off some of that surplus to give you free hot water? Do you have a car charger that uses surplus energy? How often do you use it? If the battery is fully charged, how will it serve you in the evening and overnight? If it's a 5 kilowatt battery, how much will that save you based on your energy tariff? How much would you have earned if you'd fed those 5 kilowatts per hour back to the grid instead of to the battery? And is it even worth worrying about this very much when all you get paid for feeding to the grid is, in our experience, £128.86 over 12 months? So crunching the numbers is a real challenge, and frankly my life is too busy and I don't want to spend lots and lots of time analysing data of this kind. It might have been different if we'd had a history of energy use in this house, but we didn't. We moved in, we stripped everything out, we got rid of the gas, and then we went ahead with the installation. So there was no data on which to base any calculations for what we were going to be doing. That's why, in the end, I prefer to keep things simple and get back to the original question. What is it that we're trying to do here? We generate as much electricity as we can via the biggest PV array we could fit on the roof. We use as much of this self-generated power as we can, helped by a battery and other surplus energy devices. This minimizes what we draw from the grid, which simply has to be a good thing. So I'll simply ignore all those questions on the ROI on specific components of the system and instead focus on the bigger picture. Maybe we've added to the value of the house. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we've increased its saleability. Maybe, I don't know. But the main thing is that we've got a house that is powered as much as possible by green energy, and we're very happy about that. And that's it. I hope the video helped. Don't forget to press the like button if you did enjoy it. Thank you very much for watching.